Welcome to the latest Eversheds Sutherland Legal Insights podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to this podcast which is part of our AECOM Eversheds Sutherland joint series on collaborative contracting. Today we're exploring collaborative contracting and what it means, how it's being applied and what attitudes and experiences look like in the Middle East. We're going to discuss the growing interest in collaborative contracting models for complex projects, some of the unique challenges and opportunities in the Middle East, and also AECOM and Eversheds have recently surveyed the market regarding attitudes to collaborative contracting in the region. We're going to talk through some of the results and our insights. I'm Dominic Lacey and I co-lead the infrastructure sector at Eversheds Sutherland, and I'm joined by my colleagues Tom and Roberta. Tom is a partner in our construction engineering group with 20 years experience delivering complicated infrastructure projects, many with collaborative elements. And Roberta is based in the Middle East and has wide-ranging experience across the region delivering construction engineering projects over the last 15 years. And we've also got Marc and Andrew from AECOM. Marc is a director at AECOM. He leads the advisory practice in the Middle East, including asset project monitoring, P3 technical, risk management and strategy plus services across a wide range of infrastructure and the built environment projects. And we've got Andrew Thompson, who's the senior director at AECOM, who leads the asset cost management team in the Middle East. He's worked with AECOM, including Davis Landed Legacy for over 27 years with 11 years experience in the Middle East. His main areas lie commercial and cost management, administration, procurement, tendering, ethics and compliance. So I'd like to start by just perhaps I made a recap on what we mean by collaborative contracting.
Good to be with everyone. Thanks for joining us. Well, collaborative contracting and procurement can mean a number of different things, and I think that's one of the challenges with trying to work out what it is. We worked with AECOM a number of years ago now to produce a guide to collaborative procurement and contracting where we explore a number of the options and some of the models that are available to people. And what we found is at its heart, collaborative procurement and contracting is contracting based on some form of equitable sharing of risk across the project team, where there are cross-party relationships to support successful delivery of a project or a program. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to collaboration, and there's a wide range of options available. So it can range from early contractor involvement and two-stage contracting, maybe a framework agreement, a relationship, or something more comprehensive, such as the alliances and enterprises that we see in the UK and also in Australia and other jurisdictions. But we don't want people to assume when we're talking about collaborative procurement and contracting, particularly today, that we're simply talking about that partnering, alliancing, the enterprise models that you may have heard about, which are really at the sort of far end of the scale of collaborative contracting. We can build collaborative principles into many different forms of contracts and procurement models. And I know we're going to speak later about some of the practical examples AECOM and we have seen working in the Middle East with our clients to look at collaborative ways of working and incentivization models. I think one of the things we find most important about the collaborative models are the principles and the behaviors that the parties have to adopt when they're working with a collaborative model. So the behaviors and relationships, I feel, are at the core of the collaborative approach to sort of contracting models. You're looking for aligned objectives and contracting principles which support the commercial model and risk allocation that you're trying to deliver through your project and your program. So really, when we talk about collaborative contracting and models, we're talking about the sort of projects you're going to be working on will have relative complexity or scale to justify a different approach where you're looking to build a relationship and a sort of long-term approach to delivery. I don't know if AECOM team have had any experience of that, but I think we all agree that the sort of behaviours and the trust is an important aspect of a collaborative model.
Yes, Tom. Hi, everybody. Andrew Thompson here, AECOM. I guess what we have found here in the Middle East is that in the last maybe 6-7 years, a shift in mindset with clients towards more collaborative contracting, not in its pure sense, but for elements like Tom, you mentioned, elements of collaboration that they're bringing into their existing contracts. I mean, by and large, they're still FIDIC-based contracts. The fixed price lump sum component is still there to a certain degree, but then they're looking at ways of incentivizing and sharing some risk and reward through their contracts. I think for us, on the joint paper that we did with Eversheds a while back, where it explains, the 3 different levels of collaboration and then choosing the right level. I think we're probably at level 1, which is the kind of limited experience. Yeah. But there's components in there, like for instance, 2-stage tendering, early contractor engagement. We've seen a lot more of that in the last 2 years now with certain key clients. So yeah, looking forward to kind of exploring that later. And maybe, depending on the complexity of the projects in other industries like oil and gas or even metals, things like that they would obviously explore different routes. But for us, pretty much the mainstream bread and butter clients here are starting to look this way, which is interesting.
Okay, so it's starting. I just wonder if obviously contracts have to operate within a cultural and legal framework. Roberta, what do you see as the regional challenges to collaborative contracting?
I think what we see is that there is a lack of familiarity at the highest levels of certain organizations. So we see a lot of global movement of highly trained professionals who have had experiences, whether it be in Australia or the UK or elsewhere with collaborative contracting. And they bring that to bear here, but they can't change the procurement models that are acceptable, whether it's under government tender and procurement law, so GTPL in Saudi, or in the UAE, the Abu Dhabi or Dubai contracts laws. There's very prescriptive ways of procuring projects that aren't particularly consistent with collaborative approaches. And so getting buy-in at the board level, at the C-suite level, is really, I think, where this change is going to need to come from in order to change all of those either regulations or corporate requirements. I think that, Andrew mentioned FIDIC, and we are very much in a FIDIC world still. And given that FIDIC hasn't yet produced a template on collaborative contracting, although they had, that is a little bit of an impediment here, because there's a certain level of comfort in knowing what color your contract is and it being part of that suite. I think the other thing that really is much more difficult to change, and that we do need to think about, is a culture of confidentiality and privacy, focus on secrecy. And that is for good and bad reasons. And collaborative contracting relies on relationship and trust and a certain amount of openness. And so it's an amorphous issue, but I think it's a very real impediment to adopt. As many of us know, we have a very contentious relationship generally between employers and contractors. And that's had some really severe consequences in seeing contractors fail or some international contractors move out. And therein lies the opportunity that as the most senior people who have the desire to diversify the economy, to build a self-sufficient economy, this may be a way to encourage the growth and success of homegrown contractors.
Make it more sustainable.
Well, exactly.
But I'd agree, Roberta, wholly there. I think we need to respect the culture and the privacy elements as well. But also there is a culture of trade here. Yeah. That's here. Where you go to a market or a souk and you're looking for something, product or something, and you hand over payment. But there's a bartering element in there. So we have this thing here, as some of us around the table are familiar, called a best and final offer. We also have a last and final offer. Some clients take that too far, and they go, we'll do a BAFO, LAFO, and a VLAPO, a very last and final offer. So it's trying to kind of change that mindset, and clients have been burnt by that. They've gone too far with contractors here, and contractors, like you said, have failed, not by their own demise, but by, I guess, partly their own. They signed a contract at the end of the day. There's two parties. They're going in with their eyes open, but ultimately being pushed a little bit too far. And then, they fail financially, program-wise, everything. So, and then on the flip side, clients then are starting to go, oh, hold on, maybe I did push too far a little bit on that, that particular contract. And because my project is X number of years late and there's issues of quality, procurement, supply chain, etc. So, and that has a knock-on effect as well. It's not just contractors, it's the whole ethosphere of subcontractors, suppliers, vendors, all of that goes along with it as well. So
those are those are some of the challenges, but Andrew, you were sort of alluding to some of your experiences where you are actually seeing some clarity developments. Maybe expand on that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, like it is refreshing, but it's driven more so, in my mind, if I'm being honest, it's driven more by the market, the contracting market. So if you were to ask anybody today, is it employer's market? Is it a contractor's market? It's definitely a contractor's market in the UAE. And to some extent in Saudi as well. So for the key developers that are looking to get their product to market, if it's residential or just to build developments here in the UAE and the Middle East, they ideally want to align with decent contractors like tier 1s or tier 2s that can build it correctly. The quality is thereabouts, and they have the manpower and the labor and the skill set to deliver. So with that, contractors now, especially the tier 1s, because that's a shrunken market. There isn't as many tier 1s now. Like you said, Roberta, some of them have exited. Big international contractors have exited. So smaller pool, they can pick and choose what way they want to do things. And some contractors are saying, listen, we don't want to tender against 5 or 6 other contractors, tier 1s, 2s, etc. But we will do a 2-stage with you, or we will do a kind of negotiation route, either a single source negotiation or negotiate with 2 or 3 of us. That's what they're kind of saying to clients. And clients now are changing the mindset on that. And they would have received board approval to change their procurement routes, whereas before it was fixed price lump sum, FIDIC-based contract, minimum 3 prices, so they go to tender for 5 or 6. Typically now, for certain contracts over a certain size, one of our particular clients has permission at board level, like you said, at the C-suite level, to negotiate with 1 or 2 contractors and have early contractor engagement and do 2-stage, or select the right. So there's an element of kind of collaboration in that, and then within their contracts as well. I mean, that's key. It's what they sign on paper really is important here. So trying to change that is a very important thing, because you can collaborate, you can have incentives, but ultimately there are still draconian clauses in contracts that are too one-sided. And like we work as AECOM, we work in the middle. We're obviously paid by the employer, but where we have a FIDIC engineer role or a contract administration role, we are in the middle. If the client is wrong, we'll tell them the client's wrong. If the contract is wrong, so we see the paper that we have to administer on that.
I think we are starting to see a bit of movement away from the draconian provisions. Done some work on contract suites in Saudi, in which there have been decrees that there's to be a bit more balance. And I think we're also in a real moment of innovation in the UAE and Saudi in particular, and the desire to be at the vanguard of whatever it is, whether it's technology, whether it's lifestyle offering, whatever it is. And that opens up some space that we're not going to do things the same way. Yeah.
So there's a mindset, especially with the younger local talent coming through, they're shifting towards that. Yeah.
We'll come on to the survey results in a minute. I'm sure you got some thoughts.
I was going to say, I just thought it's really interesting hearing that conversation, because I think it really resonates with what we're hearing in other jurisdictions as well. I know we've worked with a number of clients who are in a sort of similar position in their local market, where they've got that much more traditional approach to contracting, fixed price lump sum, and the contractors are pushing back on those models. And we're certainly looking work with a client in Germany, for example, with one of my colleagues over there, to explore some collaborative options. It was particularly 2-stage contracting and looking at how they can get early contractor involvement for large infrastructure, where that was very, very unusual in that market, and looking at a sort of target cost approach to some of the delivery models, where the contractor's been pushing back on the sort of fixed price model. So it's really interesting to see that this is sort of something that's happening in a number of different jurisdictions where you have had that traditional approach. And I think you mentioned the contracting models as well. I know FIDIC have got their upcoming collaborative contracts, which I think they're launching this year. So it does feel like there is a shift in that desire to try and move to different models of contracting, and FIDIC are responding to that alongside other contract forms that we all know have developed collaborative models like NEC and increasingly some of the other sort of larger contract forms. So really interesting to hear what you were saying.
Interesting to get your thoughts, Marc, on experience in the market and what you're seeing in your close role of managing projects. I'm also interested to see if you can actually see any tangible benefits in project outcomes from the collaboration.
Yeah, I think that in the era of complex giga projects and the emergence of those across the region, I think as advisors to our clients and in some instances contractors, it's important to actually emphasize the benefits of collaborative contracting, whether that's aligning objectives or looking at innovative solutions, enhancing value from an ESG perspective, perhaps, as well. It's an emerging theme, but it also has the benefit of, improving standards across projects and reducing cost and time, which is something that we're going to look at a bit further along when we look at the survey results. But I mean, the main benefit, obviously, between a contractor and a client through collaborative contracting is it offers the opportunity to avoid disputes, to maybe identify them early and to put in place early mitigation for the vested interest of everybody concerned. But it also has health and safety and environmental impacts as well. So I think all of those benefits need to be taken into the mix when we're actually advising clients in relation to these complex giga projects in an ever challenging environment that we're all trying to work within.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the start, we've done some market engagement and market research, and we've gone out to a series of big players in the regional market and asked them a series of questions about collaborative contracting. We'll be sharing that report in due course, but we're just going to talk through some of the initial findings. So, Andrew, you've had a chance to look through the survey report. Is it what you expected?
Yes, I think so. I mean, ultimately, we asked a series of questions, 14 questions all in all. If I was to give like a general 1 or 2 sentence overview, it's positive. Positive in that they are very much, certain clients and contractors would be very much aware of collaborative contracting, and they're very much interested in it and looking towards, implementing elements of collaboration in their contracts and their projects. I think if we see who responded, it's interesting and good to see that the highest respondents were the parties around the table. We had mostly the property development and employer side. We had the civil and infrastructure contracting side and the legal side as well. So the parties that set up contract that we have to adhere to, we'll say, all responded very well. I think in terms of some of the other questions, we can dive into them a little bit more detail, but I think overall, the typical time, cost, quality preference to, what's your most important thing to adhere to, the majority, over 60-70%, came back, we want all three.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to have all three, but with collaboration, there's, in my mind, in my own opinion, there's a greater chance of it achieving all three, or at least a greater part of all three. But going away from collaboration, you might achieve one. The client might get good price, but to the detriment of time and quality. And that's what we have seen in our projects. Traditional fixed price, some they'd get a bargain on the price, but the issue is what they deliver at the end of the day, the product and the timely fashion that they deliver it in. But no, it was a positive response. We went to key contractors at the right level. The over 50% of those that responded were at the senior management level as well. So we got the right answers from the right people and some interesting responses.
One of the questions we asked was how familiar the market was with collaborative contracting and partnership models. Tom, I'm interested in your observations on that.
Yeah, thanks, Dom. I think it's really interesting actually to hear what's just been said, and I completely agree with the comments that have been made. And it's clear from the survey results that the majority of respondents to the survey are familiar or very familiar with collaborative contracting, but there seems to be a bit of a disconnect with the answers we then got later on in the survey around people using the collaborative models, which again sort of bears out what was been said earlier on in this podcast today, where the response we got was less positive. So I think there's still a piece of work that we need to do to help people to understand and to explain the range of options available to them and articulate some of the benefits that might flow from the collaborative approaches, really sort of getting to the grips with that range of different options available and how they might be built into existing models and ways of working, and how we can work with our clients to support them to understand their needs and what we can do to deliver something that may be more collaborative, but perhaps not necessarily going all the way down to the far end of the scale, which might help.
Thanks. And another of the questions we asked was around what people thought about the significant regulatory changes and the impact of that on projects. And that's what aligns with what you were talking about earlier, Roberta.
That's exactly right, that there needs to be change in order for this to be viable. We may have a great deal of will in the legal teams or the contracts teams, but we need the procurement teams to have that flexibility to procure in this way.
And then there were two questions that sort of jumped out at me as being quite interesting, which was around, you sort of touched on this, but the project outcome point, Andrew, the having your cake and eat it desire.
Yes.
And then there was another one about a bit of future question about projects being hard to deliver in the next 12 months? Be interested to your and Marc's thoughts on those.
I think, well, look, from my side, the biggest challenge that the market has at the moment here is it's overheated. So it's the supply chain, it's the contracting, subcontracting chains. That whole pool of contractors and subcontractors is just smaller as a result of, we'll say, the less collaborative contracting that has happened, 6 or 8 years prior. But now, as I mentioned earlier, it's a contractor's market. Now they're picking and choosing. So it's really getting the right contractor. The tier 2s and 3s are starting to step up their game a little bit, which is good to see. But then, the key clients, the bigger clients here, still want to work with the tier 1s, maybe a couple of tier 2s to deliver their product. Most of the we call them the tier 1 clients want to do that because they want their they want the quality as well as it delivered in reasonably timely fashion. There's still a lot of product being awarded. There's huge investment. I mean, record sales. If you look at the residential side of things in the UAE, we're breaking records every week, every month in terms of residential sales. In particular, the luxury element, they've upped their game here. If you came to Dubai 8 or 10 years ago, there would be maybe 1 or 2 projects that would be decent quality if you were to benchmark it internationally in terms of finishes, internal finishes on resi or branded resi or hotels. Now there's several projects that are at the luxury end of things, and that has a price tag. So clients are providing more of that. They're selling more of that. Now they need to build more of that. And that's their challenge, is to get the, contractors' interest in it, or even available contractors.
I mean, one of the specific questions was, we asked, is it going to be harder to agree on fixed price, fixed delivery contracts over the next 12 months? And over 80% of the respondents agree with that, which is quite telling. I don't know, Marc, whether you've got any observations specifically on that, whether you agree with that future days in.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting find, right? And it's not surprising, I guess. I mean, it's always a key consideration for clients and indeed contractors as well, is to get some level of price certainty and security. I think what we've seen over the last, say, 5 years or so is the external factors as well, from a macroeconomic perspective, in terms of outside shocks to supply chains and sourcing of materials, etc. So I think any form of increased collaborative contracting in around certain areas such procurement and pricing, and how the risk and reward is going to be shared, is definitely going to have a significant benefit to projects in the region. And I think what's interesting from the survey is not only the seniority of the people who have responded to the survey, but also the developers and contractors who have responded. So we did get a high level of engagement from senior players in the market. So I think that just shows that there is appetite to come to the table and actually have a proactive approach to contracting and formation of contracts through more collaborative discussions.
Yes. And actually, I think that the last question in the survey was about whether you want to know more about collaborative contracting and partnership models, and not over 90% said they did. So I think that shows the future. But we talked a little bit about some of the challenges around the regulatory side and the C-suite buy-in. What do you think we can do more collectively as perhaps an industry to help with implementing collaborative contracting going forward?
Education is probably up there at the top of the list at the moment. Clients are familiar with it, but are they really, digging into it as much practically on their projects? Have they experienced it? Certainly elements of collaboration, but I think we need to educate them and educate everyone in the industry about it, get confidence there and trust into it, that it is successful and can be very successful. You'll get both contracting parties can still make money. They can still, everyone's entitled to profit, and they can deliver safely, good quality product as well. So it's getting that confidence in there. We need to get out there and start talking to people, get them in a room. There are initiatives happening around Dubai. I've noticed a bit more towards that. Very much so. They're aware that there are issues historically in the construction industry in terms of contracting and the conflicts and disputes and all that. And I have noticed I'm here about 11 years in the Middle East now. I've noticed, and you will have noticed as well, that there definitely are more disputes now than have been if you were to go back 8 or 9 years ago. So I've noticed more arbitrations. Contractors are not afraid, or as afraid as they were, to take a client into an arbitration, into a formal dispute. And that's probably been a good thing, because it's opened up everybody's eyes to see, look, maybe it was a little one-sided, kind of forcing change now. That and the market itself.
Tom, you've got a lot of experience of collaborative contracting in different jurisdictions, and some of your previous podcasts touched on that. Does that chime with your thoughts on how we press ahead with this agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the things we've been really trying to push with these podcasts and with the guide that we produce with AECOM to collaborative procurement and contracting. It's looking at how we can help people understand what the options are, what the range of different models are out there, and some of the benefits and pitfalls. And I think one of the things that we've been talking about in previous podcasts and in our guide is really the behaviours and how to make projects deliver. The best result is through making sure the parties are working in a collaborative way, and that starts with the behaviours of both parties. And I appreciate that is one of the education pieces that we need to work on in different jurisdictions where particularly there's a sort of an entrenched way of working and a way of delivering projects that's been done for many years. Trying to sort of shift the dial slightly towards that more relationship-based collaborative approach can be challenging, and some of those behaviours need to be the sort of the start and ends to making the models really get the best results.
I think that's really interesting, Tom, what you've just said there. There is a cultural element here. It's a melting pot of different cultural backgrounds, race, religions, everything, and a way of working that certain individuals would have worked for 20, 30 years one particular way. So we need to change those behaviors, because that probably will be where it will fall down. Getting good people around a project is always the best for any project, but getting good people that have the right mindset and the right behaviors, as Tom said. So probably, we need to get like some sessions, mock sessions on contract negotiations or some role plays. Yeah. There's lots you can do there to kind of open up people's minds and educate, get them thinking a different way and talking and communicating a different way.
And are you seeing that on the project advisory sort of side from your experience?
Yeah, I do believe so. I mean, I think certainly the emergence of, say, P3 in the region over the last 10 years or so has the way in terms of a lot of public-private partnerships and collaboration on that side of things. And I think we probably need to take that down to another level, on project level, whereby we're increasing awareness with clients and contractors about the benefits. I mean, I go back to the benefits again. I mean, it's an ever-challenging environment that we're all trying to work in, and there are some key benefits there that will have great results for everybody. So I think it's increased awareness, and I think the appetite is there for people. I think it's just creating the forums and discussions like this will certainly help bring in these points out to the open. And I think through encouragement, I think there will be an increased uptake in collaborative contracting in the years ahead.
Yeah, I bet it's interesting. By your first P3 thing, we talked a lot about the different types of collaborative contracting, and obviously public-private partnerships and all the different forms, from outsourcing to more traditional PPPs are again examples of perhaps a collaborative model. So we should make sure that is in the mix as well.
And we've noticed like a lot of our P3 work is in Saudi, is in KSA at the moment, and successfully so on schools education side. It's not as common here, the UAE, but as they drive towards more, we call it public sector infrastructure projects, like with the metro expansions and that, they'll probably, need to shift towards that. But yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Marc, bringing it down to project level. I think one really good thing that I find has been successful for me in trying to drive a bit of change has been giving real examples on real projects in the region, and sharing that with other clients, like to say, look, on this project, we did this and it was really successful. There's a live example of what we did. Have a think about it.
Isn't it?
Yeah, because like as AECOM, we had certain projects we advise on the procurement route day one. So, and if we're looking at shifting a mindset here, it's providing live examples of successful projects that we delivered, some elements of collaboration on.
And obviously, Roberta, from the regulatory side, we talked about the challenges. What do you are confident that change can be driven?
I think it's obvious here that change can be driven. It is a place that is transforming itself. It is, as in the UAE, the Gulf, and beyond. And so I think there's no reason why it can't change, and every reason why it will.
And also change quickly, because the one good thing I've noticed being here is that if they want to change something, they can do it like overnight. There's less, we call it red tape, that you'd have in other areas of the world. And they tend to make, with my own opinion, make decent decisions about things and make them quite quickly. So that change can happen quite quickly here because the way, the Middle East works.
Okay. Well, that's a positive note to end on. So I think really interesting to get everyone's views. And it sounds like There are some challenges, or there's a need, but there certainly seems to be, well, certainly from our survey and from your experiences in the local market, there, a change is happening and is going to accelerate. And we need to get behind that. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Eversheds Sutherland Legal Insights podcast.